Fantastic. Thank you. My name is Egwana Owie, and marketing lead and client partner at FranklinCovey Nigeria, and I'm really delighted to be your host for today's event. Welcome again, and I know that you will enjoy every bit of this session. So let's jump right into our agenda. Introductions to please continue on the chat. Would love to hear where you're joining us from and what you'd like to take out of today's session. We'll talk a little bit about FranklinCovey and then why we are here. And then we'll deep dive. I mean, for me, that's the meat of why we're here. And then we'll tell you a little bit about our offerings, take some feedback, we'll answer questions as many as we can, and then we'll wrap it up. And make it sound like the next 1 hour is going to be like on speed. But yes, it's going to be light speed all the way. So please tighten your seatbelts and join us on this journey. Okay. At FranklinCovey, our mission is to enable greatness in people and organizations everywhere. I say it again. Our mission at FranklinCovey is to enable greatness in people and organizations everywhere. Okay, so you will know what that means as we go on the journey. But just before we jump into the meat or the real reason why we're here, let me tell you this quote from Stephen Covey, and please just reflect upon it for a few seconds. So often, the problem is in the system, not the people. If you put good people in bad systems, you get bad results. Take a second to reflect upon this. If you put good people, great talents in bad systems, you'll get bad results. I'm sure you're thinking about it. But whilst you're still chewing on that, let me introduce to you our facilitator for today, Nkem Mojime. She's a senior delivery consultant at FranklinCovey Nigeria. And I'd rather not say a lot about her and allow you meet her. And that's because the energy in the room today is going to be so explosive that you will be taking notes, learning, sharing, engaging, and trust me, you will be better, far better than when you came into this room. So please join me and make welcome with every emoji you can find, the claps, the love, everything. Welcome with me, Nkem Mojime. Over to you, Nkem.
Thank you very much, Egwana, and thank you everybody for being on time and joining us in this very crucial conversation. And like Egwana mentioned, we are coming to you courtesy of FranklinCovey Nigeria. And our mission also, as stated by Egwana, is that we'd like to unleash the greatness in individuals and organizations around the world. And we've been doing that for over 30 years now, if I'm not mistaken. So I think we do have the required impetus to talk about this conversation. How do you move your people from hiring to thriving, right? How do you build a high performance workforce? I'm just going to run through some quick statistics and we'll be sharing some data along the way. So this is our own FranklinCovey data. So we exist in 160 plus countries around the world. We have our content translated to about 24 languages globally. So that means that if you have a Spanish audience, you have a French audience, you're a global company and you're looking for a global solution, we are your partners. Like I said, we've been at this 35 plus years, and we've served over 15,000 client engagements per year, not all through our existence. We're also very big on data and research. And so that's to back that up, we've invested over $200 million in research and solutions. And if you've ever encountered our solutions, you would agree with me that the quality of what we bring speaks for itself. So what space does FranklinCovey play in? So first things first, we are not your training organization. We're a behavioral change organization. And the reason is this, we want to play, and we have been playing in that space where great organizations have created a niche for themselves. And what do I mean by that? Well, thriving organizations focus on addressing four major challenges. And these major challenges are the challenges that matter most. And the first area is in developing exceptional leadership at all levels. And that means that from executive level to frontline, your people must have and display leadership qualities. Thriving organizations also instill the habits of effectiveness in every individual within their system. So effectiveness is not an individualistic quality. It is an organizational culture, right? Thirdly, thriving organizations have high trust, inclusive cultures. And so therefore, they are also able to pursue and drive performance because of the nature of their culture. And the fourth thing that thriving organizations do is that they have an existing and common execution framework that everybody logs into and lives by, right? So FranklinCovey plays in these four spaces, and we partner with our organizations, with our clients, right, to ensure that everything we do with them is designed to make them thrive. And that is what gives us the impetus, the competence to come and talk to you today about thriving. An example of a thriving organization. So let's use the chat box very quickly. And everyone, this is where I'm going to need your help. Okay, everybody, please go to the chat box. I want you to think of a thriving organization by whatever standards you want to measure thriving. I want you to think of a thriving organization and share that organization's name in the chat box for us very quickly. Do you know any thriving organizations? By whatever standards you want to measure it. Do you know any thriving organizations? Can you share their names in the chat box? I can tell you one. Somebody please help me put FranklinCovey in that chat box because yes, we're a thriving organization. So I want to hear from you. Do you know any thriving organizations? Please share with us in the chat box. And you can use whatever standards or metrics to measure thriving. So could you go to the chat box, everybody, and give me an example of a thriving organization? This is the starting point of our conversation. Do you know any thriving organizations? Can you share with me in the chat box? Which thriving organization do you know? Is your organization a thriving organization? Amazon, thank you very much, Egwono. Okay, Google. Do you know any thriving organizations? We have about 15, 14 plus people, sorry, yeah. Do you know any thriving organizations? So I'm seeing Amazon, I'm seeing Google, I'm seeing Apple, I'm seeing Facebook. Do you know any thriving indigenous organization? Seplat, okay. And oh, Kevin, thank you so much for this specific response. So Kevin says Seplat, and it is by share price and production volume. By share price and production volume. Bolu Watife says Microsoft. Dangote, GTB. Okay, thank you very much for the responses. And you can keep them coming. So maybe, you're just joining us or you couldn't think of one very quickly. You can keep them coming, especially as I'm about to show you the four major criteria for checking whether an organization is thriving. right? So another synonym we can use for the word thriving is greatness. So what are the 4 outcomes you will find with thriving or great organizations? There are 4, right, that we have identified through research and years of client engagement. There are 4 basic metrics by which you can check whether an organization is thriving or is, you know, playing in the greatness space. The first one is that organization must have sustained performance. So please go back to the chat box and look at all the organizations that we have there. Have they exhibited sustained performance? And that's why I particularly like Kevin's criteria. He says the share price and production volume. Has that been sustained, Kevin, over the years? The second criteria for assessing a thriving organization is that they have loyal customers. So the organizations you mentioned, do they have loyal customers? Customers have been with them for eons of years. Just look at that list again. The third criteria is that they have engaged employees. So again, looking at the examples you shared, do those organizations have engaged employees? How would you know, by the way, if they had engaged employees? The fourth and last distinct criteria for measuring a thriving organization is that they make a distinctive contribution. What does that mean? For us in FranklinCovey, when we say distinctive contribution, so let me look at the examples. If Seplat were to leave the scene today, would we miss them? Have they made such profound contributions to the society, to their people, to the families of the people who work for them? Have they made such a huge imprint that if they left the scene today, they would be sorely missed? These are the 4 criteria for measuring whether your organization is thriving or not. Now, these 4 areas are our areas of specialty in FranklinCovey. But today, I want to focus our attention on the third criteria, which is engaged employees. It is only engaged employees that thrive. And engaged employees only thrive in cultures, environments that have been prepared specifically to allow them thrive. So what is this webinar really about? Well, today, my goal or the core objective is to help you, leaders in this room, to begin to think about what you need to put in place, the systems you need to put in place to ensure that your people are translating from hiring into thriving. We want to help you redesign your hiring paradigm. We want to help you look at your onboarding and engagement as a performance system, not a standalone activity. Because too often organizations treat these as separate activities, right? Recruitment fills the role, onboarding handles the induction, engagement becomes a survey or a performance management or a town hall meeting. And performance management happens once every quarter, mid-year, and end of the year, 3 times. The problem is that employees experience hiring, engagement, onboarding, all of those things, they experience it as a journey, one singular journey. So when the journey is fragmented, performance energy begins to leak. So at the end of this session, you should be able to diagnose where your talent energy is being lost between offer letter and high performance. You'll also see how our FranklinCovey content principles practices will and can be translated into simple leadership routines, that help you with building trust, clarifying expectations, coaching consistently, and using cadence to sustain accountability. Now, for those of you in this room, the question is, are you sponsoring the system that creates performance? That's the question you need to answer. Are you sponsoring the systems that creates performance? And for the HR leaders in the room, are you enabling managers to own the employee experience? And for those of us who are not HR, but we are people managers, we have people reporting to them, the question you have to answer is, do you have routines that you use every week to engage and to ensure that your engagements with your employees are yielding the type of results that you want to see? So before we look into the system I'm talking about, right, I want us to, have a conversation around current talent trends around the world. So what we did was to look at what's happening around the world, and compare it with what's happening in climb. So the talent market has changed since 2020, let's be honest with ourselves. So, and the question that leaders often ask is, how do we hire faster? Because we have a lot of needs, positions, places we want to fill, but how do we make it faster? However, the deeper question is this. Instead of asking, how do we hire faster? Maybe we should begin to ask, how do we build a workforce that can perform, adapt, and stay engaged after we hire? So, in addition to hiring faster, we need to begin to ask ourselves, do we have the right system? Do we have the right organization? Do we have the right culture that allows our hires to perform, adapt, and stay engaged? Now, globally, employee engagement remains very low. So it's not peculiar to Nigeria, it's global. And low engagements typically translate into lost productivity, weak discretionary effort. Now, that is really important because we are in the knowledge age, the knowledge worker age, where performance is really a question of discretion, right? And therefore, this also leads to slow execution. In sub-Saharan Africa, engagement is still under pressure. While there's stress and anxiety about work, the real factors still remain in terms of employee experience not being so great. The third data on your screen is especially important for those of us in this room, executives, C-suites, people managers. Employers increasingly cite skills gap as a barrier to transformation. And this specific conversation was triggered a few weeks ago by the MD or the CEO of one of the fintechs in Nigeria. But what's the broader meaning? What does this translate to us? It means that we cannot recruit our way out of every business challenge. Hiring matters, I agree, but capability building matters just as much. So in FranklinCovey, we are framing this as a leadership challenge, not a hiring or HR challenge. This is a leadership challenge. Performance improves when leaders create clarity, trust, disciplined execution, and a cadence of accountability. So the issue is not talent alone, because even when you bring in the talent, our attrition rates are saying a different story. So the issue is not talent alone. It's a system around talent and talent management. Now, this is the global data, but what is the Nigerian data saying? Well, we also did a bit of research around this. And what we found out was that Nigeria, as always, is a paradox, a leadership paradox at that. In terms of the Nigerian context, right, it is a paradox in the sense that on the surface, headline unemployment seems to be low, 4.3%. But the undercurrent, right, is saying that organizations still don't have easy access to ready capability. Underemployment and informality, as well as skills mismatch, still remain a huge problem in the Nigerian talent market. Yeah, many people are working, well, based on the data, but not necessarily in structured environments where they build the capabilities, habits, and execution discipline required in a high-performance organization. So why do all these numbers matter? Well, the answer is quite simple. These numbers matter because leaders can no longer assume, and when I say leaders, I mean those of us in this room, can no longer assume that hiring a qualified person automatically produces performance. The reality is not in alignment with that view. This therefore means that our organizations must begin to define contribution clearly. Each role must have a clearly defined contribution that they are making to the bottom line. Onboarding must become more deliberate. Coaching must become more consistent. Otherwise, managers will inherit people who may have potential, right? But not yet the habits, the context, or the confidence to deliver on the required standards. So how do we move from simply filling roles to creating value through people? That's the question. How do we move from simply filling roles to creating values through systems? Well, that's what we want to discuss today. And I want to start off first by looking at what is the current value chain in terms of hiring, from the point of hiring to thriving. For most organizations, this is what it looks like. For most organizations, this is what it looks like. So we have attracting, selecting, right? We fill the role, and then we onboard and enable and all that work. Now, when we attract, though, are we communicating the mission and performance standards honestly? Because engagement doesn't start after probation. Engagement actually starts from ground zero. So when we're attracting people to our organizations, are we communicating the mission and performance standards honestly? When we select, are we assessing evidence of contribution and learning agility? Because that's one critical skill that you will need today, the ability and the nimbleness to keep learning. When we onboard, are we creating clarity, belonging, and early traction? When we engage, are managers creating purpose, progress, and trust? When we retain, are we giving people growth, fairness, and meaningful impact? These are the questions that we must answer as we build a value-based system around our talent. Now, a useful leadership test to this is to ask yourself, if a high potential employee joins your organization today, how quickly can they understand what matters most, who to trust, how to win, and how to grow? If the answer to these questions is dependent on luck or the personality of whoever is going to be their manager, then your system is weak. So what is the answer? Well, we want to share with you from the FranklinCovey point of view, the mindsets, the behaviors, the systems that can help you to create a value-based system that ensures that you are not just attracting the right people, you're creating the right environment for those right people to thrive. And if you remember Egbono's quotes from Stephen Covey, even if you have good people, if you don't put them in good systems, they will produce bad results. So what's the solution? Well, for us in FranklinCovey, remember we said we're framing this as a leadership problem. So we believe that leaders create the conditions for thriving. We believe that leaders create the conditions for thriving. And so therefore, our leadership ideas are useful in helping you make the connection between leadership personal credibility with organizational execution. So the first thing that the leader needs to do, right, is to inspire trust. And why is this the first thing? Because trust is the culture, the environment in which every other thing functions. And therefore, it determines whether your people, your business will thrive. And for us in FranklinCovey, we say that trust is the confidence you have in the character and the competence of a person, a system, or an organization. And so the first starting point for every leader is to inspire trust. And you do this by building both character and competence. And the reason this is important is because employees are constantly asking, can I believe you, sir? Can I believe you, ma, when you say the things you do? Can you help us win? If managers do not keep commitments, if leaders do not keep commitments, if they do not communicate honestly, or even help their people to close loops, engagement drops very quickly. The second thing that leaders must do is to create a vision. Now, I don't mean that plaque that we put on the wall, right? Or the things that we write on our websites or our documents. No. The vision we're talking about here, the context that we're speaking to vision here, is that there is a line of sight from the employee to the organization's vision, from the team to the organization's vision. People need to know what matters most, and they must know consistently. They must also know why that thing you have decided matters most really matters most. And lastly, your people must be able to describe what winning looks like in their roles. So if they are winning, what would it look like? That's what we mean by creating a vision. Third requirement of leaders is that they must help in executing strategy. And so this is where the system, the cadence of accountability comes in, the system of the cadence of accountability. I'll talk about it later on, in more detail. But the system we use and we propose and we've been using with our clients, around the world is the 4 disciplines of execution system. This is where execution is made very practical and granular. Right? So when we get to that, I will discuss it in a little bit more detail. So stay tuned, don't drop off. Now, last but not the least, leaders must coach potential. I want to say something. Please don't take offense for the people who are not in support of these people I'm talking about. Coach potential. It may take 22 years, but we will eventually get it. Why? Because talent is a seed. And leadership creates the environment for seeds to thrive. And you do that by coaching potential. And coaching cannot be a one-off. Coaching cannot be during appraisal period. Coaching is a continuum. So the message for all of us in this room is that thriving is not produced by motivational talks. It is produced by credible leadership, clear direction, and disciplined follow-through. That's what produces thriving. So now let's look at a practical application of these things that I'm talking about. Because again, at your level, you want to see how this works, right? So let's go. Let's start off first with, let's look at this system that I'm talking about from the hiring stage, right? So the first practical change that needs to happen, let's start first from hiring. You need to define the contribution that role you want to hire for is going to make to the overall objectives of the organization. I don't mean your job description. Job description simply lists, has a bunch of qualifications and, tasks, right, that will be done. I mean, in the true sense of the word, what is the contribution of this particular role to the overall objective of the team and then the larger organization? So the first paradigm shift that needs to happen is to see the role as a contributor. And therefore, if it's a contributor mindset that you're carrying, then you must define what that contribution looks like before you begin to define who the right candidate will be. Right? So more often than not, even in our job advertisements, we don't clearly state what the person must contribute to the business value. So even when we're having the interviews or the conversations, we are not clear about what this person is coming to contribute to the business value. So you must create what is called a contribution brief for each role. Then for critical vacancies, you should be able to ask specific questions, right? So the second thing that helps with the paradigm shift that is required in your hiring is that you must ask the right type of questions. So for critical vacancies, here are some examples of questions you can ask. We have them on the screen. So for instance, you must be able to answer this. What is the mission of the role that you want to fill? What's the purpose of that role in the organization, right? What are the lead behaviors that will drive the outcomes you want to see with that particular role? So in other words, you're not just interviewing for competence. You're also going to be interviewing for credibility. And to interview for credibility, you can ask questions like, when you were saddled with the responsibility of doing X, Y, Z, what were the outcomes that you were responsible for? How were you able to turn this problem around? Questions that give you more insight into the capability and the credibility of the person you're interviewing. Then finally, you need to use the selection scorecard, right? And this is the scorecard that helps you to rate evidence against outcomes. So that means we've already defined the outcomes we want from this role, right? And therefore, we are looking at the evidence based on the interview we had with this person against those outcomes. It's a scorecard. Scorecards reduces bias and helps you to connect hiring directly to performance. Okay. Now, once you modify this aspect of the journey, the next thing we would want to look at in practical terms is the onboarding. So how does onboarding become your next performance lever? So hiring is the first lever. How does onboarding become your next performance lever? Well, here we go. So what we've done is to map out the first 30 days, right? Your first 30 days onboarding says first 30 days. And the idea here, or the paradigm here, is that we want to use that first 30 days to create trust and traction. We want to use that first 30 days to create trust and traction. Oh, and by the way, this is the responsibility of the role manager. Whoever's going to be managing that role, it's not HR's responsibility. This part of the experience is largely the people manager role, right? It's the responsibility of the people manager. So for the first 30 days, we want to call this your leadership moment. In these first 30 days, new hires typically have a couple of questions running through their head. So one of the first questions they're asking is, do I belong here? What is expected of me? Who matters? How do decisions get made in this place? What does good look like in this organization? Now, if managers can answer these questions quickly, uncertainty reduces. However, if managers cannot answer these questions quickly, uncertainty increases. And when there is uncertainty, performance slows down. And that's why we call this the first 30 days of creating trust and traction. So from day 1 to 7, focus on creating belonging and clarity. So whoever the line manager for that role is should welcome the person. That person should be able to explain the role purpose. That person should be able to provide a stakeholder map. That person should be able to define what success looks like, in addition to other things that you do. So you see how this is not a HR role. This is a people manager role and responsibility. Now, from day 2 to 21, this is where you move into practice and feedback. So you let the person shadow. This is when they will produce a first visible work product. And this is where it is critical that you give specific feedback. Good work is not specific feedback. What do you want this person to continue to do? Oh, and by the way, this is not an opportunity to do feed forward. Feedback is looking at the past. Feed forward is you saying, if you continue in this XYZ mode, these are the likely outcomes for your future. They create a sense of belonging and clarity. So your role in day 8 to 21 as a manager is to remove blockers early on in their journey. Remember, we said this is a whole employee experience. It's still a whole journey. Then in day 22 to 30, you shift towards more of contribution and ownership. So this is where you're having the conversation around your first 30 days, 60 or 90 days outcomes. What are the things we want to see? This is where you identify the behaviors, the lead measures, behaviors that will help to make these outcomes a possibility. This is where you also create a learning plan. Oh, and by the way, it's at this point that you also celebrate their first win and continuous wins, because progress builds confidence, and that's what you want to build in your people. All of this ensures that engagement is high. So when you do this consistently, you create high engagement. However, we want this to be a system. We want your engagement to be a management system, not a one-off. And so what do we mean when we say we want this to be a management system? Well, what we mean is that first and foremost, engagement should not be reduced to survey scores, town halls, wellness initiatives. No. While those, tools and elements are important, they do not and cannot replace management discipline. So employees experience engagement through everyday interactions with their immediate managers and teams. So therefore, there must be a system put in place that helps them. So what we've also created is a system or a structure that allows you to do that seamlessly. So the first need for creating a management system, the first thing you need to address is the question of purpose. People want to know how their work connects to customer value, team success, enterprise priorities. So what's the purpose? The second thing you need to address in creating a management system is clarity. Ambiguity drains energy. People should know the most important goals. Yes, we're in a fast-paced environment. The world is going at such a high speed, but we must never fail to continuously create that sense of clarity in spite of the fast-paced change that we're going through. So people should know the most important goals and the few behaviors that will make the biggest difference. The third need you must put in place or address is the need for progress. Everybody wants to progress. So your employees need feedback. They need to know that they are growing. They need to know the criteria for measuring growth. They need to see visible wins, and they need to see that they need to have evidence that their effort really matters, right? And then last but not the least, do your people enjoy psychological safety? Can they raise constraints early on out without fear? The combination of these four elements will help you to create an engagement management system. So how do you make this system operational? I want to share a sample of what we do with our clients to help them make engagement an operational management performance system using the 4DX tool. So that means the 4 disciplines of execution tool, which I spoke to you earlier on. So how do we translate all the things I've talked about and make it an operational system that any organization can run with? Oh, by the way, please note that we customize our solutions to our customers or our clients' specific needs. This is simply an example of what is possible, right? If you choose to partner with FranklinCovey to create that kind of system within your organization that allows your people to thrive. So with the 4 disciplines of execution, we believe, and this is not just simply belief, it's also based research and data-driven belief, that there are 4 basic disciplines that must be in place for your people to be able to execute and continue to thrive. So what builds execution discipline is 1, having a clarity about what is wildly important to you. So in other words, choose 1 or 2 wildly important people outcomes. By the way, for us, wildly important means that critical goal that if you focus on it can change the trajectory of your organization or your team profoundly. So an example of a wildly important people outcome may be reduced ramp time for new hires, or it may be improve internal mobility, right? Now, if everything is important, managers will default to urgent operational work. That's one principle that governs the first discipline. Everything cannot be important. If everything is important, people will simply just focus on the urgent operational work. And you see, the things that really ensures that people thrive are hardly ever important. I'm sorry, they're hardly ever urgent. They are always important, but hardly ever urgent. And in the grand scheme of things, when people want to decide what to pay attention to, they usually tilt towards the urgent. So the second discipline says focus on the lead measures. Now, the other side of lead measures are lag measures. So your employee engagement survey is a lag measure. Your attrition rates are lag measures. These things only give you the results after the fact, and they are not bad, they are good. However, the thing about these measures, the lag measures, is that they are like thermometers. They only tell you what is. They can help you prevent what is, especially if what is not what you're looking for. So discipline 2 is saying, focus on what you can change, what you can control to give you the outcome you are looking for, which are the lead measures, right? So focus on the lead measures, lead measure behaviors. Examples could be quality one-on-ones, coaching conversations, number of learning hours, recognition moments, blocker removals. These are things that you have control over that can help you determine outcomes. So rather than focus on the thermometer, which are the lag measures, why don't you focus on the thermostat, which will be your lead measures? Thermostat helps you to regulate the outcomes for your lag measures. Discipline 3, a scoreboard. Now, what is a scoreboard? We all have those, online scoreboards we use to measure, we're tracking numbers. This scoreboard that we're talking about is a simple, visible, and current scoreboard that captures whether our team and our people are winning. That's all it is. So once you've clarified what good looks like in the organization, what success looks like, the metrics for measuring it, your people should be able to look at your scoreboard at a glance and, oh, I am winning. Or, oh, no, I'm lagging behind. Oh, I need, to do X, Y, Z to get there. So something that tells them that I am still in the game and I am either making progress or I'm not making progress. And then the last and final discipline is discipline 4. This is where you create a cadence of accountability. So remember lead and lag measures. If you wait till the end of the month to explore the numbers, for instance, you can't do anything about it. So with the cadence of accountability, it allows you to apply and monitor the lead measures. So have a weekly conversations where commitments are reviewed and renewed. Now let's translate this to what it would look like for a manager at a glance, a manager of people or teams. So this is what your routine for managing engagements and performance would look like at a glance. What do you notice? It's not simply just weekly, quarterly, or yearly. So Mondays, you have your alignment sessions. So the conversation will look something like this. So today is Monday. What are we doing today? What are your deliverables? What obstacles do you have? Do you need me to clear them for you? What exactly would success look like for you in this? You're having an alignment meeting. What are you checking? You're checking if their goals, their activities, their tasks are in alignment with the overall team or organizational goals. Typically, this should take you about 10 minutes, right? Midweek, you are coaching. So the idea is not to align and then leave them to do whatever they like. By midweek, you should be checking in. And what are you doing? You are asking questions. You are listening. You are removing roadblocks on their path. You are giving specific feed forward points that helps to keep them going. Friday, this is where we're having the conversation. So how did we do this week? What did we do right? We celebrate. What can we do better? What are we going to do next week? You should also have a monthly conversation. So instead of having that exit interview when the person is leaving, why don't you begin to have a monthly stay conversations so that people know that we want them to stay? And what are you asking in these conversations? Why do you still continue to work for us? What are the things that we're doing right? Why are you still interested in this, position? What might we do to help make your work easier? What are your aspirations? Where do you see yourself going in this organization? Stay conversation. And then lastly, quarterly capability reviews. So this is where you discuss future roles, skills that needs to be built, exposure that is needed, and all the works. So this is a typical example of how you can translate the performance engagement systems into your daily, weekly operations. And why does this matter, by the way? Again, another set of numbers. Retention is usually discussed as a lag measure, right? It's often discussed only when someone is resigning. However, the real decision may have been made months ago. And if a stay conversation had at that time, maybe we would prevent or can stop the exit. People stay when they experience trust, growth, fairness, and impact. Yeah, pay matters, especially in our climate, let's be honest. However, leadership experience often determines whether the employee is giving you their full commitment or they are simply complying. Discretionary efforts. That's the difference between average organizations and thriving organizations. So the data points on the slide shows that when a workforce is under pressure, many workers are open to changing employers. Workload has increased. A lot of people are complaining about that. The workplace changes have intensified. And in such an environment, vague promises are no longer enough. Employees need credible leadership. They need realistic workload. They need growth conversations. And they need to have a sense that their contribution is being noticed. So a practical retention question you should is, what would make this place where your best work can continue? And that's our role as leaders. What would make this a place where your best work can continue? This is a stay conversation, not an exit interview. Now, I've been doing a lot of talking. I'd like you to diagnose your own organizations to find out where talent energy is leaking in your own organizations. And to help you do that, I have a couple of questions on the screen. So I'd like you to look at them very quickly. And, if you like, you can share with us your scores in the chat box. Or otherwise, please sincerely look at these questions and rate your performance as an organization on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least and 5 being the most. 1 being the least and 5 being the most. How would you rate your organization's performance across these elements on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being the least and 5 being the most. I'm just going to give you a few more minutes to look through the questions again. Or if you like, you could screen grab it and use that as the basis for having a further conversation with your in-house team and hopefully with FranklinCovey. But rate your performance in these critical areas on a 1 to 5 basis. And as you do that, please attempt to answer the question, which one weak link, based on your response, if strengthened in 30 days, would improve performance faster for you? Which one weak link? So take one area where your score is not so good and try and identify what you need to strengthen in that area in the next 30 days that would improve your performance faster. And so while you're doing that or thinking about it, this is what we would like you to do with the response from that question. So week 1, for the next 30 days, do a diagnosis, right? Map your journey, identify 3 leakage points, and then select one wildly important people goal that will help you address that leakage point. Week 2, give your managers the practical tools that will be required to create engaging employee experience. So you can do that by teaching them trust behaviors. We have a solution called Leading at the Speed of Trust that helps managers and people to build trust, repair trust, and restore trust. It focuses on behaviors that embed trust in culture, right? Week 3, run a cadence. What does this mean? Choose one weekly activity that you're going to launch, whether it's manager check-ins or you're going to build a team scoreboard or you're going to have critical state conversations weekly. Choose one. And then in week 4, review what you have done, the impact so far, look at the evidence, identify what has improved, and then look at how you are going to scale this, within your organization as a whole. So this is an example of what we would like you to do for the next 30 days as a result of the assessment of your organization's hiring to thriving roadmap. Now, this will only work if senior leaders change what they sponsor and measure. And that's the honest truth. That's why we say thriving is a leadership challenge. So what are we suggesting? Senior leaders, here are a couple of things you need to do differently, because you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So CEOs, chief executives, people managers in this session, could you consider adopting one or all of these paradigm shifting, performance driving leverage to help your people thrive? So, leaders, first things first, you must stop outsourcing people performance to HR. Well, that's not to say that you're taking HR's work away from them. HR can design frameworks, they can design tools and processes. Leaders and managers create the daily experience that determines commitment and performance. So people performance is a leadership and management responsibility. That's the first paradigm shift. Secondly, what are we measuring? We need to begin to look more at the lead measure behaviors that will drive the outcomes that we want as an organization. So leaders must also track not just the lag measures, but lead behaviors like coaching, clarity, learning, recognition, blocker removers, and things like that. Managers are the multipliers. So leaders, your job is to convert strategy into daily work. And to be able to do that, you need to be able to coach. You need to be able to create clarity. You need to be able to build trust with your team members. The organization will struggle no matter how strong the strategy is if there isn't coaching, clarity, and trust. So invest in the manager's capability to do these things in addition to driving strategy. So let's close, with a core message and commitment. You do not build a thriving workforce by hiring better people alone. You build it by creating a system where capable people can trust, contribute, grow, and execute on what matters most. And that's the truth. So for leaders, the challenge is to make thriving operational, not selective, operational, consistent. Choose one role you want to focus on. Choose one manager routine you want to be implemented consistently. Choose one lead behavior that predicts better outcome. Choose one weekly cadence that keeps commitment alive. This is how your organization can move from activity to impact. Hiring brings people in. Leadership helps them to thrive. Execution turns their capability into results. So what are we trying to say? Thriving is a leadership challenge. And those of you in this room have the responsibility to ensure that everything required for your people to thrive are put in place. And that includes your systems, your culture, your paradigms, and your policies. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I have been speaking to you using a few of our FranklinCovey solutions and some external data. So the data I shared were from Bureau of Statistics, the National Bureau of Statistics, World Economic Forum, PwC Global Workforce Hopes. But more importantly, if you are interested in our solutions, especially the ones that speak to thriving, what we did was to give you a combination of content from our solution called the 4 Essential Roles of Leadership, which is targeted at C-suite executive level leaders. We also gave you content from the Speed of Trust. We have the leading at the speed of trust and working at the speed of trust. So trust content targeted at leaders and workers. We also have the 4 disciplines of execution, which I mentioned earlier on. This, though, is not it's a system that we embed in organizations. So it's not a training. You can't take it as a training or anything. It's a system that we embed and requires quite a bit of in-depth consulting work. But it's a very powerful tool. And I would encourage you to speak to Egwano and my other colleagues in here today to give you more insights or even to engage us in a conversation to see how you can bring this to your organization. And then last but not the least, the last content we also shared with you is the content on the 6 critical practices of leadership. This is targeted at your middle level managers and new people managers, right? Anybody who manages people, teams, this content is very practical for them because, again, in there we have content around coaching, around creating vision and clarity, around building trust and all the works. So I hope this has been a useful use of your time. At this juncture, I will hand over to Egwano and we will take the question and answer. Egwano, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. This was really powerful. A lot of knowledge.
You're
I'm
muted.
sure.
I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me? Can anyone
Are
hear
you
me?
muted?
No, I'm
Yes, I
not.
can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you everyone so much for just staying in this session. Coaching, clarity, trust, critical. It's amazing. Please just let the love keep going. Thank you so much. Okay, great. We've run out of time. I'd love us to do Q&A, but I'll just do one or two things quickly. And if you can stay back, that would be great, so that Nkem can take a few more questions than we normally would. Okay, we're happy to stay on for a few more minutes. So if you don't have a meeting coming up at the top of the hour, then please stay with us. We have our link to our feedback form in chat already. Please go ahead and click it so that you can give us feedback. I mean, Ken Blanton says feedback is the breakfast of champions. So we'd love to get your feedback. And very quickly, I mean, so Nkem has spoken a little bit about some of our solutions, so I'll probably not go over that again. But I wanted to just mention that we have a new solution that we know will be beneficial to your team. So I'll just tell you about it in 10 seconds, and then you can just scan the QR code so you can get more information. Okay, everyone who has stayed on to now, thank you. You have won a gift. You will get one of our guides in your email box. So please look out for it. If you want to contact us, the email is info@franklincoveynigerian.com, or you can call us on this phone number. So please ensure you reach out. A new product or program is called the Leadership Impact Lab Open Cohort. And if you want to know more about it, please go ahead. Isaac will put the link in chat. Go ahead and click the link so that you can learn more, or you can reach out to me or any member of the team to give you more detail. But it's something I'm sure you would love to be a part of. So please go ahead and just click on the link in the chat. Okay, great. Let me pause at this moment and ask, do we have any questions? Anyone wants to come off mute to share, to get answers to their questions? Okay, we'll be staying back for a little bit. Okay, Bukola says great insight. Thank you so much, Bukola. I'm glad to have you here. Okay. Okay, so we have two links in chat. Please go ahead and click the link, the feedback form, and of course, if you want to know more, just go in and just click on that Leadership Impact Lab. It's powered by the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and one that's extremely great for some of the problems that Nkem has been spoken to today. Okay, great. Nkem, let's see. I don't have any questions in chat yet. Anyone who wants to come off mute, or you have a question that you'd like Nkem to answer, please just let me know. Let me see. Okay, no, not anyone yet. Anyone typing? You can unmute. Just raise your hands and we can unmute you. Please raise your hands and we can unmute you. Okay, we'll do right away. Please go ahead and raise your hands and we can unmute you if you want to ask your question directly. Yeah, and can please go ahead and unmute.
All right, thank you very much.
Good. So I don't have any questions in chat and I don't see any raised hands. But I know that this has been such an informative and educative session that then needs action from each one of us. Yes, I see chat coming in. Let's see. Okay, is the Leadership Impact Lab open to individuals? Oh, yes, definitely. So let me talk a little bit about the Leadership Impact Lab for those who are still on the call. The Leadership Impact Lab is one that is not just an event, a 2-day session. It's one that over a period of 3 months, the leader in the cohort gets to experience and start to live the 7 habits of highly effective people to solve personal and organizational problems. We've curated in such a way that it brings value. Remember, Nkem was mentioned that we're a behavior change organization. We're not a training organization. And so in helping people change behavior, it takes a bit of time for it to happen. And so that support from us and from peers and from sponsors that you have chosen will be very impactful to ensuring that you can grow from point A to point B. Again, you determine what the metrics are for, where you'd like to go to. So if you want to know more, please, of course, click the link to get more information, and you can also book a briefing session. We'll be happy to meet up with you to discuss it. Okay. Okay, Kim, I don't see any questions. So I think that we've had a great one already. Thank you everyone for making our time. I'm just gonna stop sharing. Making our time to be here. Really appreciate your being here. Thank you very much.